Today, I want to go into this topic of burnout a little bit deeper. I've had several requests from CEOs asking me to give some insight and deeper instruction when it comes to how to deal with burnout, not only for themselves, but also for their team members as well. I can confidently say that these are conversations that more and more CEOs are having, and they are open to having these conversations, unlike about 10 years ago, where people really didn't talk about burnout at all. I would say that is one positive thing that came out of COVID was the ability to have these conversations about people's well-being and quality of life. Because we know through our research and the work that we do, that quality of life has a direct impact on a person's performance, which impacts the bottom line of our organization. If I'm going to say something very direct here, I'm just going to get to the point here, is that the fact that we have AI coming into the workforce, and that's going to change things dramatically for us as CEOs. The other competitive advantage that we have, which is going to be the main competitive advantage outside of technology, is going to be our human capital, without a shadow of a doubt. And one of the things within human capital that we have to pay attention to is people's burnout rate or their burnout resilience. What that means is their ability to avoid burnout and get through burnout faster. Because when someone burns out, as I mentioned before, it has a direct impact on the bottom line, but it also spreads as well. Think about it from this perspective. When you have 10 people on your team and one person is burned out, the other people have to pick up the slack, and basically they have to work out that much harder. And the chances of another person burning out is that much higher. So it's in our best interest to pay attention to this. The reality is that more and more people are burning out. Our research in 2023 identified that over 75%, it was close to 78% of people identified being burned out or having been burned out within the last 2 years. And those numbers haven't changed here in 2025. So we have a significant amount of people who are burning out in the workforce. And these are knowledge workers. This is the interesting thing here. We're talking about cognitive burnout and emotional burnout, which then eventually happens in their body. So then you get physical burnout as well, or you get symptoms like autoimmune diseases. When I grew up on an orchard, I used to work 16-hour days some days, and some days 7 days a week, and never really got burned out. And I can tell you that, I got tired. I got exhausted physically, but my mind was still there. My emotions were still there. In a lot of cases, I felt that much healthier because I was working harder. So as a knowledge worker, though, the stress is different. It's cognitive stress. It's emotional stress. And yes, that can be shown through your body as well. But if your brain is not working effectively, if you have staff members that are going through cognitive burnout, they're not going to be thinking, and they're not going to be able to deal with problems effectively. They're not going to be able to be as creative. And it's going to have a direct impact on the decisions that they are making, which ultimately, that's why you have people on your team. You have people on your team to make decisions effectively for your business. And burnout directly contradicts their ability to do that. And so we know through the research that we've done and through other research as well, that when someone is burned out, they're not as effective when it comes to decision making. And they are definitely not effective when it comes to being creative and being innovative and even collaborative. So collaboration comes down as well when individuals are burned out because they're more moody, they're more susceptible to emotional irregulation. So these are the things that impact our team members. So bottom line, we have to deal with burnout, and the faster and sooner and better we deal with burnout by giving our teams the resources they need to deal with burnout, the better our business is going to be. Because if you are doing this, but your competitor is not, you're going to have a competitive advantage. And we have to be aware, we have to be able to have these conversations, and we have to get past the stigma that it's just about people working too hard or too long and they just need to take breaks. That's one of the factors for burnout, but it's not the only factor. In fact, there are 6 primary factors that have been identified by another neuroscientist in her research when it comes to what actually triggers burnout. Workload is one of them. Okay, so working too much or too long, that is one of them. But it's not the only one, as I mentioned. There's conflict in values. So if someone has a conflict in values with the person that they're working with colleagues or the organization, that's another factor. Lack of autonomy is another factor. Feeling like they have insufficient rewards is another factor. Feeling like there's unfairness in the workforce, that's another factor. Feeling or getting to this level where there's some kind of conflict in the community. And what I mean by community, it could be within the organization or within the team itself. That's another factor as well. So there's a number of different factors when it comes to burnout. We just need to be aware of them as leaders, and we need to educate our team members that it's not just about working, that burnout just doesn't happen from working long hours. It happens for these other things as well. So all management should be aware of these causes of burnout. In fact, all individuals should be aware of these causes, because then they can self-diagnose and identify whether they are in, you can say, in the path or on the path of getting to burnout. Because a lot of people put their heads in the sand and say, I don't want to be burned out. I'm not burned out. Maybe I'm just tired. I need to keep going. I shouldn't tell anybody about this. I'm ashamed of this, or whatever that might be. And eventually it doesn't end up in a positive situation. So there's a couple of things here that we need to pay attention to. Ultimately, we need to help people identify burnout symptoms before they get burned out. But secondly, they have to know how to actually avoid burnout and the recovery mechanisms, most importantly. So burnout is avoided through recovery mechanisms. And these are the things, or what we call coping mechanisms. These are the things that actually help a person recover. Fundamentally, what recovery is about is calming down the nervous system. So that's essentially what the person is doing, is calming down the nervous system so the body can actually heal itself, so the mind can heal itself, so the cells within the body can heal themselves. That's how recovery actually works. It's about getting out of our own way so that the self-healing can actually happen. The recovery is one aspect, okay? But we also have to get to the source of the burnout. That's a completely different topic, which is, okay, what's actually causing the burnout? And is this something that is changeable? Can it be modified? Does it need to be changed? Or is it the person that actually needs to build better resilience skills? We have to get to the root cause of the burnout itself. A lot of the times we don't get to the root cause of the burnout. Again, we as leaders, as CEOs, have to first become investigators. That's the best thing that we could do as CEOs, is become an investigator and teach our people to become investigators, teach our managers to become investigators, and not just brush things off. Because if we can get down to the root cause of burnout, then we can identify, okay, is this person who is dealing with these symptoms of burnout, are they the only individuals? Or are there other people that are susceptible to this cause of burnout as well? It's just like in the area of customer complaints. Did you know, and because we've done a lot of work in this area when it comes to customer experience and client experience and the psychology behind that and the science behind that, that typically 1 out of 30 or 29 roughly people actually verbally complain about having some kind of issue with an organization. 1 out of 1/3. Now that number has changed a little bit now because it's so easy to complain on social media. But what does that say? That is a small fraction of people that are actually having pains or issues with your business. If only 1 of 30 people is complaining, what's happening to the other 29? They're shopping somewhere else, or they're actively looking somewhere else. Okay. So this is something for us to pay attention to as business leaders. If we have one person who's dealing with burnout, chances are that there's other people who are susceptible to burnout as well. So we have to get down to the root cause and become investigators and figure out what the root cause is. The other is recovery. And recovery, as I mentioned before, is about calming the nervous system. And there's 2 ways to recover. Okay, there's 2 different strategies here, and they are 2 separate strategies, and both are very important. The first strategy that I'm going to talk about is a typical strategy that people use, which is taking time off. And that could be in the form of taking a weekend off, a week off, a few weeks sabbatical off, going away on a vacation, or whatever that might be. That is how many people traditionally deal with burnout, is they take time off. And that time off is needed. It's very important for people to do that. So that's what we will call taking time off, or deep rest, or whatever you want to call it. That's one strategy. The other strategy is what we call active recovery. And this strategy is even more important than taking time off or taking time away, right? So the first strategy is about pulling yourself out of the environment. This strategy, which is active recovery, is about recovering within the environment. This is where you do things like meditation or mindfulness practices or daily walks or spending time in nature. And there's two particular things that need to be done here, which are very important. I put this into practice. We put this into practice with everybody that we work with, is that every single day there should be a minimum of a 20-minute active recovery exercise, whether that's a walk, meditation practice, breathing practice, whatever it may be, at least once a day. That's an absolute must. It's an absolute critical thing. The challenge is for most people is they'll work their butts off throughout the day, and then they will tell themselves that they don't have time to recover. That's the number one excuse that people have, is they don't have the time. I'm going to tell you right now that you do have the time. We have to figure this part out. You do this, this is going to help you tremendously. The second part is doing a longer practice or a longer active recovery practice once a week. This should be part of your routine as well. So whether that's going to a spa, getting a massage, whatever that may be, that's a longer practice, typically about an hour at a minimum. So every single day, you should be doing at least a 15-minute exercise to recover, which is what we call active recovery. And then a weekly practice of taking at least an hour to do some other practice or the same practice a little bit longer. Okay, these are very, very important things. The reason why I want to stress the active recovery is that a lot of people go away, they'll do the first strategy, which is pulling themselves out of the environment, only to come back to the same environment, and nothing really changes. So it's a temporary fix. Now, if you combine that with the daily and the weekly active recovery practices, that becomes that much more effective. So it's a combination of both. What I found and what we found through our research is that people that have the regular daily and the weekly practices and routines, not that they shouldn't, but they don't have to take those other methods to avoid burnout. They don't need to take those long vacations. They don't need to take those weekends off. They are able to get through the environment because they are training themselves to deal with the environment itself, as opposed to those individuals that have to take themselves out of the environment to get rest and coming back into the same environment only to get to the same level of stress and burnout. So this is the difference between those two methods. The best method is combining both. That's the top tier method, right? Taking time off, going on vacations, doing those types of things, and doing the regular active recovery practices on a daily and a weekly basis. If you do that, your chances of burning out are going to significantly drop. I just want to share one other point here as well that's very, very important, because we've seen and we've identified a pattern here. Individuals who are burning out, there's a correlation, and in many cases, there's also a cause, is what we find is that individuals that are burning out, yes, they are working longer, yes, they are working harder, but they're not exactly effective. They're not productive. The individuals that are dealing with burnout, in most cases, they don't have effective systems put into place, both in their professional life or in their personal life. And they are being ineffective and inefficient in their processing. That's why they have to work longer, and that's why they have to work harder. It's not the workload itself, it's their level of productivity. And what ends up happening is when people actually get into this zone of getting close to burnout, the productivity actually drops, which causes or accelerates their path to burnout. So the first thing that we identify when we are working with someone who is on the cusp of burnout or has chances of burnout is taking a look at their structure. It's what we call their architecture of their personal life and their professional life to see how productive that they're actually being. What habits, routines do they have? How do they schedule their calendar? Who do they have on their team to offload certain things with? And so these are the types of things that we take a look at it from a strategic perspective before we actually get into the personal side as well. Because if they are doing active recovery, if they're going away on vacations, but again, they're coming back and they're still ineffective in their systems, in their productivity, they're most likely to get back into that same routine as well. So I want to say this very directly, is when I take a look at someone who complains about burnout, I take a look and I say, chances are this person is not very productive in their systems. Okay, so those individuals aren't necessarily the highest producers. They're the ones that work harder and longer, but they don't necessarily produce the most. There is a difference here, because what you want on your team and where you want to be as an individual is not only do you want to be a hard worker, But if you're going to be working long hours, they have to be at what we call optimal productivity. There's no point in working longer hours if you're not optimally productive. And so that works against you. So this is the last point I wanted to make here because it's very important. If you see people on your team who are, again, burning out, you got to take a look at the structure and system that they have, that they've created for themselves, both on the professional side and on the personal side. And then you can help them with the recovery routines, because that will actually enable them to rest. But doing the recovery routines themselves without fixing the system is only going to put them back into the same place a week later, a month later, a year later. It's not going to work. So hopefully this helps, and it provides you some value to be able to apply to your own life, but also share with your team members as well.